Wonderful. And once we're done with the warm up, now let's start tackling the big beasts. And the first one will be register page. As you can see, there's more to it. So there's going to be a form with some form inputs, and it will be able to toggle between register and login. And for register, we'll need to have the name input. But then if the user is just logging in, then it's just email and password. Yes, there's going to be a logo there. There's also going to be a heading that will toggle when we're clicking on a button, and all kinds of goodies. And also, eventually, we will perform a fetch request once we're submitting the form. Now, we're nowhere close to that yet. So first, we'll build out the component, then we'll set up the global state, and then eventually we'll also, of course, set up our server and start making those requests. So again, if you have been following my tutorials, you know that I do everything step by step. And even though some people might find that annoying, I think that's the best way to learn. Now, before we continue, let me just mention something. You're probably noticing how the preview is different. So as I was tinkering with this one around, I noticed that there's options to preview in the browser. And we can also set up the themes. And in my case, I switched to a dark theme because I think it's going to be more pleasant to your eyes. Now, how you can do that? Well, you can right click. Again, you need to open, first of all, the README in the preview, like so. So that's the first one. And then once you're already in the preview, then you can right click again and notice this one. So I can open this one in the browser, like so. So if that's what you prefer, awesome. Just keep in mind one thing, where as you update your README, the preview one will update, but not the one in the browser. So if I'll remove that dummy comment, the first comment, notice how this one updated right away, but then the browser is not updating. So something to keep in mind. And then also, as far as the themes, just right click and then pick a theme. And in my case, I think I went with GitHub Dark. But of course, you have all of these options that you can choose from. So that's as far as the look. Now let's start talking about the component, the register component. And here's what we want to do. We want to import the use state and use effect from React. Then we also want to get the logo from the components. We want to get the wrapper since we want to get the styling. Eventually, later, we'll also get global context and use navigate. And of course, I will discuss it once we get there. Then there's going to be some initial state where I want to set up the name empty string, email, password, also a is member, which is going to be a Boolean. And it doesn't really matter what is your default value. In my case, I'm going to go with default true. And it's always my preference to set up a local state if possible. Again, that is if possible. There will be global state in this application. And I will discuss this once we set up the global context. Basically, what is my preference and what are your options? For time being, just remember that this is going to be initial state that we pass in the use state. And then I have the values, which basically is this object. And we also have set values function, which we'll utilize as we set up the functionality. And in here, eventually, again, there's going to be a global context as well as use navigate. So both of these things we will implement here. And of course, also a handle change because we'll have inputs. So every time we update that input, we want to fire off something. So this is what we're going to use, as well as on submit. Now, for time being, notice how basically both of them are just console logs. So I'm just looking for the event object. And then more specifically, I log the event.target. And the same goes for on submit, where essentially we trigger this when we submit the form. And eventually, this is where we'll have all our logic. So this is where we'll check for the values. And then if the values are there, then we submit the user to our backend, to our server. And then as far as the return, it's going to be a wrapper. We'll set it up as full page. And as you can see here, we have a form. There's going to be a class here on submit, then logo, the heading 3. And for time being, I'm just going to have one input, the name input, and we'll hard code everything. And then in next video, we'll set up a separate component, and I'll discuss that in a greater detail once we get there. And all the way in the bottom, there's going to be a button with type submit.